my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. I'd like to take a minute to talk about this episode's sponsor, Aeroflow Breast Pumps. Did you know that breast pumps and milk storage bags, maternity compression garments, even lactation education and support can all be covered by your insurance? Aeroflow helps millions of parents unlock these breastfeeding and postpartum essentials by working directly with your insurance company to get these free essentials shipped straight to your door. Aeroflow offers all major pump brands, including Medela, Spectra, Motif, Lancino, Amita, LV, Willow, and more. Visit aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to fill out their free and easy qualify through insurance form. Don't forget to use the promo code BIRTHHOUR15 in their online shop for 15% off all supplies and accessories. You've got enough on your plate. Why not let Aeroflow Breast Pumps help support you on your breastfeeding journey? At the end of this episode, I talk with Kate not only about getting her breast pump for free through Aeroflow, but also about taking advantage of their online lactation classes. So stay tuned for that conversation. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth. Because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another way you can get involved with the Birth Hour community is by joining our Patreon. This is where you pledge your support of the Birth Hour at $5 a month or more, and you get perks in return, like access to all of our archived episodes. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. We've been putting out birth stories since 2015, and those are all available in our archives via Patreon. And you also get access to our private Facebook community, which is a really great group of people who are there to support you, become friends, and just encourage you on this journey through parenthood. So find out more about that at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Olivia, and she was on the podcast in 2021, episode 644, if you want to listen to that in the Patreon archives. Today, she's back to talk about the process of embryo adoption with a full sibling to her first child, as well as a surprise natural pregnancy. All right, let's hear from Olivia. Hi, Olivia. Welcome back to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, so you were on episode 644 back in 2021, so we'll link to that. But will you just tell listeners a little bit about you and your family now?
Yeah. So my name is Olivia Hall. I have been married to my husband, Isaac, for almost 10 years. We live in a small town in Kentucky. They pronounce it Lancaster, even though it's spelled Lancaster. We have 3 beautiful children. Elias is 4, Ruby is 2, and Ezra is 4 months. So my husband is a preacher, and I am a stay-at-home mom.
All right. And today we're going to hear the birth stories of babies 2 and 3, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right. So why don't you just start us off with your journey to getting pregnant with your second?
Okay. So I know on the first episode that I did when I shared Elias's story, I talked a lot about our infertility journey on that. So I won't go through all of that again, but just to kind of sum it up, I have PCOS. My husband has some male factor infertility. And after a lot of workups and everything, we were told by our fertility doctor at the time that it wasn't impossible for us to conceive naturally, but it was unlikely. So we decided to go through the National Embryo Donation Center out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and do an embryo adoption. So we adopted 8 embryos. We transferred 3 and had a miscarriage, transferred 3 and had our son, Elias. And then when Elias was 16 months old, we went back to the NEDC for a sibling transfer. We transferred the last 2 embryos we had, which were his fully genetic siblings. And we were really excited to find out that we were pregnant. From the first ultrasound, we saw that it was just one baby had started growing. And so we were going to have one of Elias's fully genetic siblings. And that was really cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a different way to go about it. But we've been very blessed and are thankful to have both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very early on, I was pretty extremely nauseous and throwing up. I had had quite a bit of that with my first pregnancy with Elias, but it was even worse this time. I ended up losing about 25 pounds throughout the course of the pregnancy. So I weighed less when I gave birth than I did when I got pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty rough.
Yeah, it sounds miserable.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
I always say I hate to put it this way because obviously I love my daughter so much, but her pregnancy just kind of felt like the life was being sucked out of me just from all of the different complications that we had. So I was on 3 different nausea medicines, and those kind of allowed me to keep enough food down to keep us alive and semi-functional, but not necessarily overly healthy. But we made it. So pretty early on, I knew for sure that I was going to go back to the same group of providers that I had switched to about halfway through Elias's pregnancy. And specifically, I wanted to see the same midwife that was there when my son was born, because she is just the most phenomenal person ever. Definitely part of her fan club. So it is actually a group that practices out of Lexington, Kentucky, which is about an hour away from where we live. But it's a really well-reviewed hospital around here. And that midwife in particular is well thought of because she's just so awesome. So I was excited to get to work with her again. One of the things that I choose to do while I'm pregnant that may be a little bit different. I choose not to do the glucose tolerance test. I do the finger pricks instead and monitor my blood sugar at home. I know that women with PCOS are at a higher likelihood of being diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So I just feel more comfortable kind of watching what my blood sugar is doing based off of what I'm actually eating rather than like one snapshot, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I start that around 24 weeks. And with my first pregnancy, everything was good. I didn't get diagnosed with gestational diabetes then. With Ruby's pregnancy, however, my second pregnancy, my first kind of warning sign that something was not quite the same was that my fasting numbers were high. So first thing in the morning, they would be just a little bit higher than where they wanted them to be. And so at 28 weeks, after trying to do a bunch of different changes with my diet and exercise, my midwife said that we really just needed to go ahead and send me to an endocrinologist and diagnose me with gestational diabetes. So I cried a lot about that. I felt like I had failed. And I do want to share that because I had tried so hard, so many different things to get my blood sugar on track without, having to do any kind of interventions. But when I saw the endocrinologist, I got in to see her about 30 weeks, and she was really kind, really reassuring that in my case, the fasting numbers, there's not a lot you can do yourself to fix that. It's just your body is struggling and it needs insulin. So when I saw her, she immediately put me on insulin. And the practice that I go to, they then require you to do biweekly appointments. So I was going to my midwife on Tuesdays for an NST, and then going to see another OB in the practice on Fridays for a biophysical profile. So that definitely felt like a full-time job, driving 2 hours every Tuesday and every Friday, plus staying for the appointments. It was a lot. I also had some issues with the insulin making me, it wasn't necessarily more nauseous than I already was, but I had more pronounced food aversions on it, which isn't something I think I've really heard on here before, but nothing sounded good. And so I was continuing to lose weight. I think I lost about 15 pounds in my first trimester and then 10 in my third. So I joke that I had a really good week in October, and that was about it.
Oh.
Yeah. But it was nice to be able to see Ruby a lot during that pregnancy because everything just felt a little more anxious with the nausea, the losing weight, the gestational diabetes. So from the biophysical profiles, we were able to really keep a close eye on her, and she was doing great. So I'll skip ahead to 37 weeks. I saw my midwife on a Tuesday, and Ruby looked great on the NSTs. My midwife did tell me that she was going out of town that end of the week and weekend with her daughter. And I jokingly said something like, oh, well, this will be the weekend I go into labor then. It was. So on Friday, I went back for the biophysical profile and met with the OB that I had been seeing. And she let me know that they had measured my fluid at only 7 centimeters, which is pretty low. I think they said if it had been at 4, they would have sent me immediately to be induced. But where we were keeping a close eye on it, they just kind of sent me home with recommendations that I rest a lot that weekend and they would revisit it the next week. So I tried to rest a lot that Friday, and the next day on Saturday, my son had just turned 2 the week before. So that was not very easy to do, but I did decide that I was going to get out my pump and try and see if I could get any kind of colostrum or anything to come out. And I say that because I didn't pump for more than like 5 or 8 minutes. I hated the way it felt, but about 2 hours after I did that, I was sitting on the yoga ball. I think we were watching Bluey or something with my son, and I felt a pop and a gush and realized that my water had broken. So we called my mother-in-law to come and get our son. I knew that I didn't want to just hang around the house for too long, just because I knew with my fluid already being low, I wanted to be at the hospital where I could be monitored and make sure everything was okay. And because I was only 37 weeks still. I took a shower and ate dinner, and my mother-in-law came and got Elias and took him home with her. And we got to the hospital around 6 p.m. I don't think they were very busy that night because they took me just straight into a room and everybody was really chill. And so that was kind of nice. It wasn't a very rushed or stressful atmosphere. The nurse was very kind and just chatting with us about everything. And so the laborist at the hospital came in and did the AmnioSure test, that strip test where they check to see if it changes color, I think, to see if your water's broken. And it actually came back negative, which I was very surprised by. But he said, well, we can take a sample of it and put it under the microscope and check for ferning. So he did that, and we waited for a while. And then he came back and he said, well, the light from the microscope is broken and nobody's here to replace it. So
oh my gosh,
it's probably not your water. Yeah, I know. I was like, that's frustrating.
The suspense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I really think it's my water. I had the exact same thing happen with my son, and they were nice, but you could tell that they were really thinking like, she just needs to go home kind of thing.
Yeah. I've heard that those tests are wrong all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Just from anecdotally on this podcast.
Right. That's exactly. I was thinking of different stories that I had heard on here where I was like,
yeah,
I really think I probably know that my water is broken. And so finally he did agree to do an ultrasound and just go ahead and measure the fluid around her to make sure everything was okay. And he was only able to find 3 centimeters of fluid. And I told him the day before it was 7. So he was like, well, that's probably a good indication that you were right, that your water broke. So imagine that, a mom knowing something. But they called my OB that I had been seeing because, of course, my midwife was out of town. And obviously they agreed, yes, she's got to stay and be induced because if I had that little fluid, that's not really safe. So they went ahead and started Pitocin, which I was pretty nervous about because with my first labor, my son was born at 35 weeks and it took a lot of Pitocin and things lasted for a very long time with him. But this time was much different. It didn't take as much Pitocin for things to get going. And it was probably around 9 p.m. and I was having some regular contractions. My nurse had been following hospital policy and every 30 minutes she had been turning up the Pitocin. And the midwife that was on call, that was actually the one that was with me during labor, noticed that and actually asked her to stop because she said, we don't want to overdo it. And she's having really good contractions, which stuck out to me because I appreciated that. I wasn't really in a place to advocate for that, but I liked that she asked her to stop turning it up. The nurse was really, really nice. She made sure to tell me that wherever I was comfortable was good with her. And I was most comfortable on the yoga ball. She kind of had to keep coming back and forth to readjust the monitors, but she didn't mind. And she kept telling me, she's looking good. Everything's fine. You just stay where you're comfortable. So I was on the yoga ball for most of the night. I was pretty internal all night and I didn't really want or need any outside touch or support. So my husband was just kind of resting and checking in on me every so often. I do remember that at one point I said something to the nurse about, I don't feel like the contractions are doing enough and they're not lasting long enough. And she said, well, according to the monitor, they're lasting 1.5 minutes. How long do you want them to last? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize they were lasting that long. So I was really coping well for the most part until about 5 a.m. I started feeling pretty impatient and just tired. I'd been up all night. And so I asked to be checked. The midwife checked me and said I was 6 centimeters and there was still that like a small intact sac. If I wanted that broken, she was like, oh, that would probably speed things up. So I agreed to that, but I immediately had much stronger contractions and I just wasn't really prepared for transition unmedicated. And unmedicated had been my goal with my son, but his induction was so long and so difficult that I really needed the epidural with him. And I didn't know how to calm myself down this time. And my husband and I had not really discussed it. So to him, when I asked for the epidural again, it was just kind of like, oh, well, she needs it, so we should get the epidural. He stepped out of the room and the nurse was in there helping me get the epidural. The hospital policy is that the partner leaves the room, which for him is probably good because he doesn't do well with needles. So it was about 7:30 a.m., pretty close to shift change, but my night nurse had stayed with me to help me get the epidural. And I was in a pretty bad spot at this point, just crying and kind of freaking out. But she really calmed me down and was just chatting with me actually about Harry Potter, I think, because she had a Harry Potter badge reel. And as soon as the anesthesiologist came into the room, I was calmer because she had been talking to me. And my first thought was, oh, I don't want that anymore. But I'm such a people pleaser that I didn't feel like I could say, I've changed my mind. I don't want the epidural. I just went ahead and let them place it. So by 8 a.m., about 30 minutes after having the epidural placed, they had a shift change and I met my new nurse and I told her that I really wasn't feeling good, that I couldn't feel anything below my neck. Everything was numb. And she actually used the doctor's name, which I won't say, but she said, you got a Dr. So-and-so special. Apparently, he's notorious for pushing an extremely high bolus of medication so that he doesn't have to come back and fix it if people complain about pain. So that was not something I wanted to hear. And I just got very upset and I said, turn it off. And she was like, well, I can turn it down. I said, no, turn it off. And so she did. And I laid in bed for about 2 more hours. And by that point, a lot of the medication had worn off. But of course, they didn't want me to get out of the bed because I had had the epidural. So I was able to move my legs and my feet. I was feeling everything for the most part again, because I had really just had that one big bolus of medication, which I very much regretted because it felt so awful. But about 2 hours in, around 10 o'clock, I was feeling better and I started to feel a ton of pressure. So I called my nurse in and she checked and she said, yes, you're 10 centimeters. Your daughter's pretty low. Let's do some practice pushes. So I started doing practice, pushing probably about 4. And it didn't feel very good on my back, but the nurse didn't want me to get up or to move really because of having the epidural placed. And so I just stayed on my back and kept pushing until finally I felt this really big drop and started screaming. And she said, oh no, stop. And I was screaming, I can't stop. And so she runs to the door to yell down the hall. My midwife is running, that was on call. She's running into my room and literally just runs to the end of the bed and puts her hands out. And my daughter is born into her hands in one push. And she doesn't have time to put on gloves or anything. So it was very, very fast pushing experience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was intense. And I felt the ring of fire. I will say, I think that it was still probably numbed a little bit from the medication, but I did feel a lot of it. So immediately postpartum was fantastic. I got to do skin to skin, which I didn't get to do with my son because he was born so early. And it was just magical. It was like everything that I needed my first birth to be that it wasn't. And it just really kind of healed that part of me that had missed that with my son. I think that golden hour also aided in my anxiety being a lot better postpartum this time. Also, what I try to do, since, we have very planned pregnancies, these two were, is to half my anxiety medication while I'm pregnant, which I was able to do with my daughter. But my midwife and I had discussed that we would go ahead and put it back at the regular dosage immediately postpartum. And that helped tremendously with my postpartum anxiety. That did not get as bad this time.
That's good.
Yeah. So overall, postpartum with her was great. The only thing was I pretty much immediately regretted asking for that epidural. I felt like if I had had some more coping strategies or if my husband and I had talked about it, I probably could have avoided it. And that regret was compounded with thinking that I might not ever be pregnant again because we had used all of the embryos we had adopted and we weren't really sure where we were going to go from there. So yeah, it was a lot of, well, I wish I had done this or that. But in the end, I was thankful for her birth and that experience and just kind of hoped that I would be able to experience another birth. So postpartum with her, I really focused on controlling my PCOS symptoms. I was doing a lot of high protein, low carb. My midwife recommended, sorry if I'm saying this wrong, but myo-inositol or inositol supplement. Yeah. And she also recommended doing progesterone suppositories during my luteal phase. And all of those things combined really helped with some of the hormonal issues that I had been having previously, which interestingly enough will lead very much into getting pregnant with Ezra.
Okay.
So when Ruby was around a year old, we actually connected with a family that was looking for a family to adopt their embryos. And we had decided that we were going to do this private embryo adoption with them. And that process still takes quite a long time. All of the legal paperwork and getting embryo clearance and shipments and everything was just a lot. But when Ruby was about 18 months old, we signed the papers. So the embryos were legally ours. We had adopted 8 more embryos and had them shipped to our clinic. And 2 days later, we found out we were pregnant naturally for the first time ever.
Wow.
So that was intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find out? Were you even testing?
Well, I won't say we weren't trying.
Okay.
because we haven't prevented in years. Like I said, it was not something that was on our radar that it was even possible. We've literally never been pregnant. We tried for about 5 years before going the embryo adoption route. So wasn't something that we were expecting to happen. My husband was having to stay home because he was preaching on Sunday, but I was taking our kids with me to Texas for my granddad's 90th birthday party that weekend. And we were flying, and I knew that my cycle should be starting in a day or so. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll just take this pregnancy test and pack some pads, for the trip, and it'll be fine. It was not really on my radar. It was just something precautionary, I guess, that I was taking the test for. And it was not negative. So yeah, I think I was probably screaming when I got out of the shower and saw it.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, my husband looked at it and he's like, when did you take that? Is that an old one? And I'm like, no, I took it right before I got in the shower. So we were just in complete and utter disbelief. So I had the same extreme nausea again, had to take medicine all the way through pregnancy with him. I say that the day I got to stop taking nausea medicine was the day he was born. So that was not super fun. The beginning was just very chaotic for his pregnancy, which makes me sad. But it was a shock, like I said. Also, my husband was kind of towards the beginning of an extremely bad ulcerative colitis flare-up, which just continued throughout my pregnancy. He actually had 2 surgeries, a 1-week stay in the hospital, not connected to the surgeries, and I think we counted up 8 ER visits while I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh, that's so stressful.
Yeah, it was different for sure. I was always kind of saying, like, I'm so thankful that God gave us this baby, but I am so confused as to why it's happening right now. So we were going through a lot. And I did try to do what I had done previously, which is half my anxiety medication. And it was just not something that I could do this time with all of the stress, I think, surrounding the pregnancy with my husband's illnesses and 2 young children. I remember crying to the nurse that works with my midwife. She's also wonderful. And telling her, I just feel like I'm failing if I have to stay on this medicine that's, not necessarily considered safe. And she just looked at me and she said, you are doing exactly what you need to do to take care of yourself and your baby. She said, don't feel guilty about that because you're doing it for the right reasons. You're not, you're taking care of yourself, basically. So just thought that was something worth sharing in case anybody else is going through an extremely difficult pregnancy and feels like they need help.
Yeah.
So I was with my same midwife that was there that I had care with through half of my son's pregnancy, all of my daughter's pregnancy, and I was getting to see her again. She was just so excited for us. She had been there through some of the fertility issues and was just thrilled that we were able to have another baby. But we also kind of laughed at just the timing of everything. Like, it didn't make sense, but it's okay. So once again, I was doing finger pricks at 24 weeks to check for my blood sugar levels. And I had some high numbers, but not quite the same experience as with Ruby. But my midwife said she felt most comfortable just calling it gestational diabetes, sending me to an endocrinologist, just making sure we had kind of extra eyes on it since I had the history of needing insulin during pregnancy. This time, I did not need insulin, so that did make it a little bit physically easier. And while I still needed the nausea medicine, I was able to gain some weight this pregnancy. I think I gained 9 pounds. I was 9 pounds heavier when he was born, and that seemed like a real goal that I had reached.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing that I did during this pregnancy that was really wonderful was I hired a doula for the first time. So as I said before, I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband's a preacher. We don't make a ton of money. I just sort of assumed that there was no way I could afford a doula. But if anybody listening is in Kentucky, I would recommend them looking into, it's called Hope's Embrace. And they offer income-based doula services, and they will kind of take in your financial information and tell you like kind of a reduced price for what you would have to pay for a doula. And we did qualify for the reduced price, and it was something that was within our ability to pay. So we were really excited to go through them and be able to hire a doula, knowing that my husband's health was very up and down. Like I said, we didn't really know how he was going to be feeling the day I went into labor or weeks leading up to that. So we were matched with our doula, Laura, and she was incredible. She was exactly what I needed. She was always there at the end of pregnancy when I needed to talk to somebody, just worried about different things because, you know, everything always seems scarier when you're like very pregnant. And so she helped me through just the cramping. And I texted her when I lost my mucus plug and she asked for a picture, which I thought was hilarious because I was like, oh, I thought that would be gross, but here, you can see it, you know, excited to share it with somebody. So that was funny. I also had quite a bit of prodromal labor this time. That started around 35 weeks. I ended up going to the hospital 3 different times with contractions that had been 1 to 2 minutes apart for more than 5 hours. And when I got there, they were like registering on the monitors. They could see the contractions, but it wasn't changing my cervix. So that was a little bit of a mind game for sure. And again, very nice to have Laura to talk to give me some encouragement through all of that. I did not need insulin again with this gestational diabetes until right at the end of 38 weeks, going into 39 weeks, I realized that I was having some higher blood sugar numbers fasting. And I knew that that meant that they were probably going to want to put me on insulin. So at my 38-week appointment, I think I was 38 weeks and 5 days, I mentioned this to my midwife, who said, yes, that probably does indicate that you're going to need to be on insulin. And so we talked about it. And I said, is there any way that we could just go ahead and induce? Because I don't want to be on insulin again with the issues with food and everything that I had the last time. I've been having this prodromal labor for weeks. Isaac was actually, my husband was in a really good spot health-wise at that point. He wasn't as sick. And with all of those things taken into consideration, she decided, yes, I think that that's a good course of action. We're almost 39 weeks. We'll go ahead and induce. So that was on a Thursday that I had that appointment with her. She did a cervical check and I was 3 centimeters. She asked for permission to do a sweep, which I agreed to. And she said that I was a 3, kind of stretchy. And she said she could kind of stretch me to a 4. So we were in a really good spot to go ahead and start an induction that night. We stayed around Lexington so that we didn't have to do the drive home and back, which was kind of nice. It sort of turned into a little date day. And we actually went and had pizza, which I had not had in months because of, trying to control my blood sugar numbers. Maybe not the best idea, but it was delicious. So we went back to the hospital and checked in at 5 o'clock. They went through all of my history, got everything set up, and we started Pitocin around 7. And once again, things didn't take as long. And we just kind of rested there for a few hours, letting the Pitocin start working. My nurse, her name was Ashley. And I just kind of want to give her a shout out because she was so incredible. I did mention this time to her, I don't want to go too high on the Pitocin. And she said, oh, don't worry, I will never turn it up without asking you. And she didn't. And I thought that was incredible because, they're told to turn it up every 30 minutes, but she was very kind, very supportive of that. And she never once turned it up without asking my permission first. So I think we turned it up twice in the couple of hours that we rested. Around 10 p.m., we both decided that we were just going to lay down and try to get some sleep since I was having some contractions, but still nothing as bad as the prodromal labor that had sent me to the hospital previously. So we laid down. I think my husband probably got some sleep, but I did not. Around midnight, though, there was just a shift. I was having very strong contractions and feeling like I could not sit still through them. So I woke up Isaac and told him, I need you to call Laura. And he said, well, do you want to call her right now, or do you want to try some different positions with me? And I said, no, I need you to call Laura. I need her here right now. It was like I did not feel like I could be in any kind of labor without having her there. She was just such a good support. So she was amazing. She got there within 30 minutes, I think. So she was there about 12:30, and I was sitting on the toilet laboring, which felt really good this time. That was kind of my spot. Like the yoga ball was my spot for Ruby's labor. And I remember Isaac came up behind me and he was like, hey, look who's here. And I looked up and saw Laura, and the bathroom lights were around her, so it kind of looked like she was glowing. And I was like, oh, my angel, like you're here. So very excited to see her. She helped me with different hip squeezes. We did a lot of movement. And around 2 a.m., I think, so she had been there about an hour and a half, I was starting to get into transition. My midwife had checked me and I was at 7 centimeters. And my doula, Laura, kind of suggested maybe we should ask about nitrous oxide, because we had talked about that as something that I might want to try during labor. So I said, okay, I will try it. I had been using a fan on my face. Like that was my husband's main job, was to make sure that this fan was on my face at all times, or else I was just getting too hot and feeling like I was suffocating. So I agreed to try the nitrous. The nurse came in with it and I put it on my face, and I think I did 2 breaths, and I took it off and I said, I hate this. And I threw it at her. Bless her heart. I feel so bad about this now. And she kind of was talking quietly to my husband and to my doula, like, oh, she could put it back on and try it again. And I kind of was like, no, I don't want that. I found out a week later that she had never actually turned on the medicine, that I was only breathing in oxygen. And that was why she was trying to get them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was why she was trying to get them to convince me to put it back on my face. But I was so far in labor land that was not going to happen. I was not going to put that thing back on my face. So she left. I hope she doesn't hate me for throwing that thing at her. I'm sure she doesn't, but that was kind of funny. Around probably about 3 a.m., so about an hour and a half before my son was born, I started screaming at everybody that I was dying and that somebody had to get me an epidural. And my midwife was like, okay, we're all right. Why don't we get you some fluids and we can get you set up for an epidural if you really want that. And it felt very much like they were stalling, and they were. And I was just begging and pleading with anybody to get me medicine. And at one point, my wonderful doula said, you are doing so great. She's real calm. She's rubbing my back. You don't need an epidural. You're doing so great. She's like, remember, that's why you hired me, to get you through this. And I looked at her and I said, well, if that's why you're here, then just go home. So she did not go home. She just kind of laughed and she was like, you're going to be okay. We're going to make it through. So transition was definitely rough, but she was like, why don't we kind of calm down? And she turned on some birth affirmations that she had sent me before to listen to. So that was playing in the room. I'd been on my feet for most of this time. And so the nurse recommended that I do that throne position on the bed, where you're kind of still allowing baby to move down, but you're able to sit. And so I did that, and I was gripping onto my feet and kind of like pulling them up to my knees, up to my ears every time I had a contraction. And I was able to go more internally and sort of calm myself down after that. So we were in the room, my husband and I'm laboring on the bed. My doula's there, kind of rubbing my back through each contraction. My midwife, my nurse, and another nurse are all in the room, just calmly telling me how well I'm doing. My husband commented later that it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, just all of these women supporting me through this labor, which I thought was very sweet. So that went on for a little over an hour, and my midwife quietly told my nurse that she was going to have to go out of the room to use the bathroom and do some charting. And so, of course, that's when things changed. I was saying, he's just not coming out. It felt like he was putting so much pressure, but he just wasn't making that last final descent out. So my nurse suggested I try side lying positions, kind of like you do in the mile circuit. So I did one contraction on one side and turned and did another contraction on the other side. And I leapt out of the bed. And I said, I will not do that again. That hurts so bad. And so I was leaning over the bed. My doula said that this lasted for about 4 minutes of me standing up, leaning over the bed. My husband, Isaac, had my hands, holding my hands, and my doula was squeezing my hips. And the nurse could tell that they could all tell something was very different. And so the nurse said, just let me know when you feel pushy. We'll get you back in the bed. And I was sort of ignoring her because I didn't want to be back in the bed. And all of a sudden, I swear there was no change. There was nothing different. It was just all of a sudden his head was out. And I screamed, there's a head. And that was all that my body could do at that point, was just push. And so his head shot out. I'm standing up. I reached down with my hand and grabbed onto his head so he doesn't fall out onto the floor. My main nurse has run to the door to yell down the hall. She apparently yelled, I need hands, is what my husband said she said. And my doula is telling me, fall back on me. So I am putting all of my weight on her, holding my son's head so that he doesn't fall on the floor.
Oh my gosh.
She gets me down onto her, my doula gets me down onto her lap. And another nurse runs over and reaches down so that I can let go. And he's born into her hands, ungloved again. So apparently pushing just goes extremely fast for me. So that my midwife was not even in the room when he was born. She ran in like 2 seconds later. And she was like, you didn't wait for me again. And we all had a good laugh about that. My doula said we had pretty delayed cord clamping because they had to get him untangled from all of the wires and get him up on my chest and then help get me off the floor and back onto the bed. But he was doing great. He had great color. He was crying right away. And I think the first thing I said when I kind of came down from that adrenaline rush was, Isaac, he has your nose. And so that's something that my doula thought was just absolutely hilarious, that's the first thing I noticed. So again, immediate postpartum with him was excellent because we had that golden hour of him just laying on my chest. He latched right away and was able to nurse. My doula fed me a granola bar while I was laying in bed. And we just kind of got tucked in and just were able to lay there. I did end up bleeding quite a bit this time, which had not happened previously, which my midwife commented is kind of the crummy part of not having an epidural, because she was having to do quite a bit to make sure that my placenta was whole and that there was nothing left. It was whole, but she was having to manually remove some pretty large blood clots. So I ended up getting a full bag of Pitocin, actually more Pitocin, to stop the bleeding than I had even had to start the labor. So got a full bag of Pitocin, and that still didn't quite stop it. So they had to give me, I don't remember what the shot was in my leg, but I got both of those. And after that, things slowed down. But we were in the labor and delivery room for, I think, close to 2 hours longer than normal, just because of all of the bleeding issues. But once we finally got moved up to postpartum, things really slowed down, and we were able to just kind of breast. Our babies were able to come in and meet the new baby. And we had a really good postpartum. His was definitely the easiest by far. He is our best sleeper, our best nurser. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with being born much closer to his due date than the other two. Mm-hmm. But he is a real trooper. He's 4 months old now and just the perfect little addition to our family.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming back and sharing. It's always fun to get an update. And these were very different experiences, I feel like, too.
Yes, I felt like they kind of tied in together, Ruby's and Ezra's, because I was so determined after Ruby that I was going to make it without an epidural, even though I think I threatened everybody at the time to get me one. So,
yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, any new resources you want to share or repeats?
I just want to mention again, Hope's Embrace, if you're in Kentucky, that income-based doula service. They also offer different education opportunities. So they're a really great resource. And then my doula is actually normally a bereavement doula, but she does work with Hope's Embrace to take on live birth clients as well, because she doesn't charge for her bereavement services. So her business is Redwood Bereavement Birth Services. Please check her out. Laura is just incredible, and she is a wonderful asset to anybody who is looking for a doula. So those are my main resources that I wanted to share.
Great. And then where can people connect with you?
I am on Instagram. It is private, but if you want to message me, I'm more than happy to talk to you. It's Olivia N. Hall. And I also, I guess my email will be on the show notes too, and they can email me as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Olivia.
Thank you so much, Bran. It was a pleasure to be back.
Now I'm going to chat with Kate about Aeroflow breast pumps and how you can get your breast pump and other things for free through insurance, like their online classes, accessories, all kinds of great things. All of that is at aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birth hour. All right, let's hear from Kate. Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for coming on the Birth Hour today to chat with me about Aeroflow breast pumps.
Yay. Hi, Brandon. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, you reached out via Instagram about Aeroflow and your experience with them, and I was so excited to talk with you. So will you just tell people a little bit about, how you found Aeroflow and the process you went through for using their services?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually through the Birth Hour, through your podcast, that I heard about Aeroflow and decided to just fill out the form. It's like a very simple form you fill out online where you put in your insurance information, and then Aeroflow does the rest.
Yeah.
And so they got me a free breast pump. I think it was the Spectra is the one that was the one I chose through insurance. But Aeroflow will actually show you all of the different pumps available to you, how much they cost through insurance. Some of them you do have to pay a little bit, and then they show you the ones that are fully covered. And so I decided, I chose the Spectra, and they sent it to me. And then I think I got an email or a text that said hey, thanks for, using Aeroflow. You should also sign up for our lactation classes. And, you get tons of those sort of promotional emails.
Right.
And I didn't think much of it. I was okay, whatever, I'll take a look at this later. And then I started looking more into it, and I was oh, actually these classes look pretty cool. They were fully virtual and they were covered by insurance. And so I decided, I was what the heck, let's do it. And I signed up for, I think, 4 different classes. I only made it to 2 of them, but the 2 that I went to were Lactation 101 and Pumping 101. And they're just such great classes. I was so surprised by the quality of the classes. They're taught by, is it
IBCLC?
Yeah. And they just gave a ton of good information about starting breastfeeding off right. And so it also would be helpful too for people who are newly breastfeeding, just kind of work through some potential breastfeeding issues like latching or positioning. But yeah, I contribute a lot to my success. So my daughter is 4 weeks old now. And we had a pretty solid start to breastfeeding. I've been exclusively breastfeeding, and I contribute a lot of it to having that support from the class. The way the classes run too they're live.
Oh, cool. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, they're virtual, so you can join via Zoom.
Yeah,
but they're live, and so the instructor is there like teaching the course. They're also really just like super good teachers. Like I felt like the way they presented information was really good. They had tons of like visuals and videos, like live demonstrations where they had like a baby doll and they were showing different like positions and ways to get baby to latch. And so they are live though, so you can ask questions. And so you're able to like ask questions in the chat. You can, unmute and like have a conversation back and forth. So very like helpful for like if you have specific questions too about lactation.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Especially like you said, like even after baby arrives to be able to like look at the positioning of the baby doll and like position your own baby on screen and be like, like this, or that's great.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And like the pumping 101, like this is my first baby and I had never pumped before. And so I have the same pump that they were using in the demo, the Spectra.
Oh, nice.
And so it was really cool to I kind of like walked along with, like did the demo along with them on the same pump, which was just really helpful having never used a breast pump before. Like,
yeah.
They look kind of like scary. At least to me, they looked pretty scary. And so it was nice to like be able to sort of walk through with the instructor and get a demo.
So when you were signing up for it, was the scheduling, were there like several a month or like lots of options or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was pretty convenient. They gave a few times a month, I want to say, and like different, I want to say they were like different hours too.
Okay.
But it was like scheduling was really, really easy. I remember like, cause they have, all your information, like they have insurance information already. And so they do all the back end work of clearing this with insurance. Cause they're, classes run by professionals and they do cost money, but insurance covers the cost. And so, they would like take attendance at the beginning of the Zoom call. And then they did like all that back end work to make sure it was covered by insurance. And so I didn't have to do anything except like put in my name and email to sign up. So yeah, like really easy.
Awesome.
And again, like kind of going into it, I was like, I'll give this a try, kind of see what it's like. And then I was just like captivated. I remember after the call, getting off particularly the Lactation 101 call, and just like being like to my partner, like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear like what I learned.
Oh, cool.
Like he was like, wow, you see, like, you're like an expert now in lactation. I was like, I feel like it. Like, I feel like I'm like, have a lot of good, solid information. So yeah, like super pleasantly surprised by how informative and just helpful the classes were.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that I had posted about Aeroflow on Instagram and you responded like, their classes are amazing. And so I knew you were passionate about it enough to like respond to an Instagram story.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. And I knew they had lactation education, but I wasn't fully aware of the format and everything and the fact that they're live. I mean, that's like having your own virtual lactation consultant. So that's amazing.
And I had taken like a childbirth ed class, paid for, like it was a community one that I paid for here. And I live in Minneapolis. And it was like, one of the weeks we went over lactation and it was like similar information, but like free, like I was like, and it also like it was kind of went more in depth because the Aeroflow class was specifically a lactation class, like the Lactation 101 class, is what I'm thinking of. So yeah, it was just like very quality, like good information.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to add this definitely to our resources on the website and our childbirth course because we go over a lot of that stuff as well. But the live aspect, I think, is just so great, even if it's a refresher for, second or third time, or you already took a class, just something to kind of get a refresher and ask questions and things like that. So.
And there are some other classes, like the other ones I signed up for but didn't end up making. There was like one on like maternity leave, like and your kind of like I think lactation stuff around leave and like going back to work.
Right.
But yeah, they were all covered through insurance. So.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to have to reach out to Aeroflow and audit these classes so that I can talk about it more as well. But thank you so much for shining a spotlight on it.
Yeah, for sure. Highly recommend. So when you get that email or that text that says, hey, do you want to also sign up for the classes? You should do it. Cause like I said, I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, like promotional email for Airflow, but.
Right. And we're all paying so much for insurance. Like we might as well get as much out of it as we can.
Totally. It was well worth it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Kate.
Yeah, of course, Bryn. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you again to Olivia for sharing her birth stories with us and to Aeroflow for sponsoring this episode. Remember, you can get your free breast pump and other things from Aeroflow at aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour. And if you want other information from today's episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and just search for Olivia's name in the search bar to find her show notes page.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.